Hello, everyone. I am Ishita, and my guest today is an artist at heart, a craftsman in life with many feathers on his cap. He's known to be one of India's most accomplished game makers. He made his literary debut in 2020 with the much acclaimed short story collection Sutradhar. He's the curator of the anthology Shared Roots Tales from the Indosphere, which launched last year. And this year, he brought the story of Ritrahan to mesmerize us with his verse. Ratul Chakraborty. Hi, Ratul. Thank you so much for catching up with me.
Thank you so much, Ishita ji. Thank you so much for having me here.
So many feathers in your cap, so many things, so many talents that you have. Author, gamer, designer, photographer, poet, a cultural enthusiast. So, which one of those is the most prominent, and does it overlap, or does one passion complement the other?
I think all of them kind of are merging together to create, whatever output is the sum total of all those experiences. And you really cannot say that this part is being influenced by that experience. What happens is that over time, each of your experiences, whatever your interest in, whatever you spend time upon, they start forming these layers, and they form these layers in the subconscious. So in the creative process, you don't know from where those ideas and where those thoughts are coming. And then I think the great thing about having varied interests, and this is something I recommend to everybody, get as much useless knowledge as possible. Because a lot of times people, when I talk to folks, they say that, ये पढ़ के क्या होगा? ये देख के क्या होने वाला है? But the point is that for any kind of creative field, the true magic happens when you are able to interconnect experiences from different strata, from your entire gamut of experiences, and then you are able to connect them, and then some interesting thought forms. Otherwise, it becomes very rote. For me, I am very fortunate that I have had the opportunity to, and the family support to do a lot of things. My parents allowed me to work in games at a time when games were not. Genuinely asked me like, इससे कुछ पैसा वैसा आता है क्या? And I tell them like, no, no, this is
The
actually a
question every
huge.
Indian parent asks their children.
So when they learned that after engineering, like this is the plan, they had some inkling, but they didn't know how serious I was. So what is so I have to thank my parents and my wife for putting up with all. Your psyche is formed out of all of these different ways.
Yeah, I mean, from engineering to gaming, and then now author, poet. That's as varied as it can get, really. And I myself am a budding poet. Once you become a poet, you see poetry in everything. You step out and you can find inspiration for poetry in oddest of things. So, what inspired you to, from a gamer to become a poet, and how did that journey come about?
So first of all, I don't consider myself to be a poet at all.
Okay.
I use the word verse when I say when I talk about Ritrahan, and like I don't even read that much poetry. I'll
Okay.
literally be very, very frank with you. But at the very beginning, when I was talking about Ritrahan with my family and friends, I had always told that okay, this has to be written in verse, and that is because I consider myself to be a storyteller, not an author, not a writer, not a poet, not an entertainer. I consider myself to be a storyteller. Storytelling is actually one of the most primal human emotions. So imagine, like, 50,000 years back in a cave around a fire, people are sitting and somebody is recounting that, okay, this is how I hunted. Or that is how, because stories are one of the most primal ways that a civilization or a society passes on morals, values, ethics, knowledge, whatever you say, the most powerful way of conveying anything is stories. And stories always used to be spoken a lot. Stories, there would be storytellers. And this is something that is true across all cultures, from Aesop to Homer to our own Katha tradition that we have. Stories were always, always, always. I don't know if you have read the unabridged version of Mahabharata. Mahabharata is actually a story, you know, a certain person goes to Naimisharanya, Southi, and he's telling the story of a particular yagna that has happened. And in that yagna, somebody else is telling the story of the Pandavas. So it is actually, so storytelling is a part of oral tradition. The reason why we speak in verse, we use verse for this, is because verse is the most powerful way to convey certain emotions. When you want to talk about rhetoric, when you want to talk about passing on something, that can be repeated very easily. People use verse because when you talk about, okay, this song is very catchy, or certain lines they resonate with you because they have a certain rhythm within it. They have a certain poetry within them, and that actually helps me as a speaker to connect with you as a somebody who's listening. When I'm writing something, I imagine that okay, somebody is sitting in front of me, or I'm sitting in front of X number of people,
Like a conversation.
and yes, and whatever allows me to get my point across verbally is something that I write, like I'm kind of translating.
Yeah.
So that's why verse comes in. In Sutrothar also you will see that in a lot of stories there are suddenly verses in the middle and all of that. You will find that same thing in Tolkien. If you read Lord of the Rings, there will be those kind of passages. These are there in n number of how do I put it, works. And I think one of the reasons why those endure is because these nuggets are there to, as something which is very physical. Because verse only makes sense when you speak it out. You'll not find a rhythm in poetry or rhythm in verse unless you're able to say those things, say those words enough. So while writing, even for Vitrahan, I basically, after writing a couple of lines, I would actually say those out loud.
Yeah.
And that's how that rhythm within Vitrahan came to. And so it's a purely technical choice. I am a very, very prosaic person. Otherwise, I am not a big poet.
As a reader of Vritrahan, I think it worked perfectly. In fact, a few authors suggest this little technique of owning and polishing your script that, once you have written something, read it out loud. And if it sounds good to your ears, it would sound good to the reader. So I think I can see both the things in your creation. That of course it was a verse, it flows as a conversation, and it immediately catches the attention of the reader. That as if Ratul is speaking to the reader. I also believe that was the aim when you were writing it, so it turned out perfectly. And but one thing that I really wanted to know was that in Sutradhar, you have included, you may call it verse, but as a budding poet, I was seeing poetry included in that story, in the middle of the story. And that really, that really amazed me because I think very few authors would include poetry or verse in their stories. And I asked that because in my first book, I almost included poetry myself. I feel it's a bold choice to include both the genres in one piece. And how did you reach that decision that this is my creation? I would have mythological fiction and poetry combined in one.
It's not a decision at all because I never thought about that ke log kya kahenge types. I don't care actually.
Wow.
So I'll be very honest with this. So in my gaming, I'm a creative director, design director. I deal with creative things in both my professional life and my, when I'm writing. So I actually have seen extremes of, like to where decision making is driven by data and 10,000
Yeah,
different studies and market surveys, and then you kind of take a certain call. That's when
right.
you are working for a multinational product which is making probably
Yeah,
$1 billion or something like that. This is, and one of the things that I love making games, but the thing is that games are something that you make as a team. It is never your game. You're always a part of a larger, and you have a larger responsibility towards your company and all of that.
true.
The book is an escape. Like whatever I'm writing, that is an escape from that reality.
Yeah,
In which I said that okay, this is unfiltered me. Whether the book is successful or it is failure,
yeah,
it will be a reflection of, and I'm not saying commercial
true.
success or commercial failure. I'm saying from a literary perspective, whether it is creatively a success or creatively a failure. There is nobody else to blame. So I I am very, very, like, I did not even think twice about it because I felt that this is the right way to do it. Because as I said, if you're influenced by like J.R. Tolkien, even the big burly warriors suddenly break into songs in the middle of Lord of the Rings. You know?
Right, right,
So
right.
it's something that I feel very natural. And I don't know why people don't do it more often, because in our normal life, we hum tunes while working on something. We'll sing a couple of lines. I don't understand that why this is not reflected. And when Bollywood does this, people say, "Oh, this is not realistic," and all of that. I am very surprised, because I think more and more people should be doing this, because this is a very, very natural and normal way of how people interact, how or how people live their lives. So for me, I never had any thoughts or about, like, there were no external dependencies that I had put on myself. For all three of these books, I was operating solely on the basis of a creative vision that I wanted to put on the pages, right? And as I said, like, a part of that literary vision is that it has to be conversation. It has to have that storyteller vibe. Once you are aligned on those things, then these decisions are not decisions. You don't really spend time on it. Fortunately, my publisher didn't find any problem on those things. That would have been a very difficult conversation, probably. But thankfully, that did not happen. I was very lucky to have extremely supportive publishers for all three of us.
Yeah, and not that the readers find any problem. I mean, I absolutely loved it gives a very nice, very smooth flow, very creative flow, and it just pulls you in. That also brings me to my next question. All three books of yours, they are in very different genres. There is this mythological fiction, then there is the verse, and then of course an anthology. So, switching genres shows your creativity knows no bounds. But again, it is a very bold move, I feel. Does that scare you as an author trying to carve your own niche among Indian readers? I mean, do you think it may hinder the process of creating a loyal audience base for you?
See, I never looked at myself as somebody who is writing for a particular genre. I am like, all three of my work, I consider them to be literary fiction, not like genre fiction.
Mhm.
Um, the only, like, and I'll give you a bit of background about how these three books kind of came to be. Like, what is the thought process behind how the books. So any work that I start, it is an exploration of this one single question: who am I? Anything that I'm writing, whether any of the stories of Sutradhar, if you look at it, shared roots, not so much, because there were multiple authors, but still I tried to kind of bring that element in. With Hunt, it is always trying to answer that one question: who am I, from different angles? That, the questions that are rising in me, and I'm trying to answer it on those pages. And that's so, whatever is coming out from the pen is me actually trying to look at that question from various different angles. That way, I think these books are like, if you asked about your, you know, like, what my readers would think. I think any reader who is interested in finding out that question, not finding out, but rather exploring that particular question, I think they should be picking that up. And I think when you talk about my brand as an author, for the lack of a better term, it's like, Ratul is somebody who is trying to answer this one question, which is, who am I? And once I start thinking on that lines, then genre became a servant to that larger group. Because if you look at Sutradhar, there is the Aurangzeb story is basically a cosmic horror story. There are ghost stories. There are slice of life
Yeah.
elements. There are pure historicals. In order to answer the greater question of who am I'm willing to go into any genre. So for me, that is the purpose of literature. Like any enduring piece of literature that I remember that has connected with me, always tried to answer this one question. That is what I took. When you look at Ramayana, or if you look at Mahabharata, they are manuals on trying to answer it. Sri Ram, through his entire life and his actions, is trying to answer that one question: who am I? Who is Sri Ram? He is the prince, he is the king, he is the husband. Circumstances are asking, putting this question to Sri Ram, that who are you? And he is Maryada Purushottam, because he is answering that. He's finding out that, you know, the right answer, that who am I in that particular moment. And so all of that is why Ramayana actually connects with us so much. that we find ourselves when we start answering these questions through books. That's when we find our reflection in that particular book, and that's when a book stays with you. Otherwise, okay, I know the plot, acha idhar twist tha, theek hai, ho gaya, and then I move on to the next book. But the ones that truly remain classics are those in whose pages you find the answers to this one particular question. I think the great works of art always tries to answer this.
Yeah, and it just makes me recall that one line of from Sutradhar that you had written that I shall search for the one who beckons me, and that line just spoke to me, you know. And I mean, I think so. Your search was really for yourself, who Ratul really is, and I think that reflects in everything that you have created. And I think that is the most important question that I think every reader somewhere is searching for himself in the books that they read, and those of us who really go after this question end up writing.
Definitely, this is the core of the creative process. Like if you take
Mm,
out all these other considerations from
right.
market, reader, etc., nobody is putting a gun to your head and telling you that it's right. Ishita, na goli maar denge. Nobody has done that. From inside, this thing is coming,
Mm,
and because every human being is trying to answer that. All our life, whatever we're doing, all of us are. Have you heard of this term called the hero's journey? So it's a story structure, and basically it kind of talks about how certain stories across cultures they have certain similarities of a hero who gets a calling and then leaves his or her home and then goes to an goes to a world which is unknown and dangerous, and there he has to suffer,
mm.
but through suffering he discovers himself,
He finds, yeah.
and that is when he becomes a hero. He completes some great challenge, and then he's coming back to his home, but now home looks different because in this journey he himself has changed, and that is the hero's journey. And one of the reasons, and this particular loop, this story loop, is found across cultures, whether it is in this particular loop, whether it is Hindu, Christian, Islamic, Mesoamerican, African. Again, if you look at Ramayana, he
Mm.
leaves home, goes to the forest, goes through a lot of trouble, and he comes back as a king, okay, after defeating Ravan, and that is a hero's journey. The reason why this works is because subconsciously in our head we are going through this hero's journey every day. Basically, we are at home, and home is what we call a safe place. And then we have to leave the safe place to go out in the wider world, whether to work, whether for college, school, whatever. A place where I am not in control, place
Yeah,
with unknowns, a place with dangers, a bad boss, some bully, uh, ratings अच्छा मिलेगा कि नहीं मिलेगा. All those things are there, real problems. And we
right.
negotiate that.
Mm.
And then when we come back home at night, we are not the same person who had left in the morning. The experiences have changed us. And we are doing this every day. And because in our subconscious we are doing this every day, when we see this loop in our story, connect with that story very easy. So the point is that every human being, they have certain motivations, how to put it, certain patterns that are woven in the subconscious. That is a part of what we call the human condition, the human experience.
True.
And as an author or as creators, when we create something that transcends time, that transcends what we call the attention cycle, when it transcends something that, it means that you have touched with that very primal core pattern that is happening in that process. And I think as creators, that should be a aim that
Yeah,
we try and touch that layer of humanity that is present within all of us.
that is that is very true. And I think as human beings, because there is no limit to our subconscious. Every person has a balance of a hero and a villain in them. and there is always a trigger that pulls out one of the two from within us. And even like you were talking about Sri Ram and how he became a hero. And I feel that there is that this hero, in some people it is latent, it is dormant, and it is always a villain who pulls out that hero. We all have that potential within us.
See,
I feel it's
see.
it is every one
So,
of us needs either a hero or a villain, and
so just to clarify, the hero in Hero's Journey is a technical term. It can call it the protagonist here.
yeah, yeah, of course, we
Okay.
are talking about
Because
positive.
hero and villain is a moral term, right? That okay, this is a good guy, this is a bad guy, right? So we are not going into morals. I think if you look at you know Ravan, who was a villain, but if you look at this, he also had this particular journey. He left home,
Yeah,
did all sorts of things, and then when he came back home, he
he
was
was
a
the
changed
biggest
guy.
bug.
So there is something that Valmiki ji had written, and then there are a lot of folk stuff that has kind of come in. When stories take life, and I think this is a very Indic tradition, that when a particular story takes life, there are storytellers come and take that story and then add their own layers to it. And that's
Right.
how it goes and spreads across. If you go to any part of India, and this is something that you can do, you travel any part of India, in some forest or all, there would be a place where they would say, okay, Pandavas had stayed, or there will be one rock that would be
Yeah,
there. They will say, okay, Bhima had put it so that Draupadi could cross. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
have seen 4 such things. In
yeah,
my, I myself have seen 4 such places where there was this big rock that was, ये भीम जी का रखा हुआ है. द्रौपदी जी को क्रॉस करना था तो उसने उधर वो डाल दिया.
yeah.
So stories get transmitted by storytellers, and as stories get transmitted, they pick up flavors, they
True.
pick up nuances, because
Hmm.
the storyteller is not writing a story in abstraction. Like how we write today in the word and then we send it to the publisher. No, but a storyteller, every time this person is telling a story, he has a live audience, and
Right.
and that guy has to connect to that audience. So stories take different flavors, and then when somebody in that audience they listen to a particular story and then they transfer it to
They
somebody
add
else,
their own
then
flavor.
that there are things that get added. So there is one authoritative source, which is the Valmiki Ramayana. And then you will see the countless variations of Ramayana, both
Right.
for Ramayana and for Mahabharata. You see countless variations. And every village you go and you try to hear about a particular incident in Ramayana, you'll
Right.
find that there will be some variation, idhar ka udhar, there would be that, because that is how we make the stories all. So it's very interesting. Like if for somebody who is trying to research into this stuff, how stories spread and how they are how they take on a life of their own. I
Hmm.
think India is a fascinating.
This
It's a
cauldron of
fascinating
cultures and
place of magic. That uh, like the words come alive as you kind of
yeah.
go from village to village, and within a village between different quarters there will be changes. So that for me is very beautiful. That means that okay, you have written something, okay, you have created something which is so awesome that
Yeah.
people are taking it and making it their own.
Right.
In Western world they'll call it plagiarism. but but
We
here
have been
if you look at
sharing.
but here it is, we are like a river here. If Valmiki ji's Ramayana is the main river, then I am a tributary which is flowing into it and
Mhm.
adding my own water to it. And that's
Very
how I have heard, folks from 2 or 3 different states, when they say that, okay, this is my version of Ramayana, he said that he's not countering Valmiki's Ramayana. He said, I'm just a tributary flowing into that, you know,
right.
into that larger stream of Katha.
Yeah, yeah, and